My name is Jessica Venable, and I was invited to give this presentation on grantsmanship and grant writing. Before I start any presentation, typically I humble up. And this is a term and an art that I learned from Sweeney Winchief, who told me to remember where I came from. So in that sense, I really want to put my acknowledgments at the front end of my presentation and at the back end, so that those who have helped me and all of us along the way know that they are with me. So I want to thank the people who care for our kids and our parents, who make it possible for us to be here, along with our spouses and partners, and even the people who look over roads and transit that get us here safely, people who clean our offices and our homes. And in particular, I want to thank all of the women who have contributed knowingly and unknowingly to this presentation. All of the women who I am speaking about today or quoted in today's presentation are women of color, and they're all scientists. For some of you who were here at the previous meeting, I never like to walk in and give a workshop that's just canned that I pulled off the shelf, because that's not useful to anyone. Rather, I wanted to hear what you had to say, what you know, what you don't know, what you want to know, and then design something around that. What I heard you say is that among your top concerns are fit and belongingness. Do I fit in with what funders are looking for? Do I belong there? How do I make those decisions? And if I don't fit, why not? And everyone's got so much to juggle: decisions, compromises, participants that you have to look out for. And you have to look out for yourself and ensure that you're giving of your authentic self, because in the end, the money will go away and you are left with yourself and your ideas. So the question is, how can you fit without breaking? I want to spend today talking a little bit about spaces. A lot of you did acknowledge and echo much of what I wanted to discuss throughout the presentation. And we're talking about funders and their spaces and their assumptions, the research spaces and those assumptions, what your spaces and your assumptions are, and how do you find place? How do you navigate those spaces? How do you know when to enter, when to disrupt, when to challenge, when to ally, when to give in? And ultimately, you have to have a sense of peace about the decisions that you make in grant seeking. And if you stand for nothing, you'll fall. If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. So that's really, really important as you're embarking and working more in developing your own style of grant seeking. Mise en place. You know what this term means? Mise en place is it's French, and it technically means everything in its place. It's often used in a restaurant setting that tells you everyone who's in the kitchen where things go, how things are prepared, who is doing what. And you often see it if you look into a commercial kitchen, all of these little pockets of food and parsley and things like that partitioned off into the right size, right squares. And you can move very easily from one kitchen to another because there's a sense of mise en place. This is like the framework for commercial cooking. It's about preparation. How do you navigate a cramped and crowded space without getting burned or cut? Familiarity with the space that you're in, knowing that there is certain things go in certain places. I know where to find the knives. I know where to find the mixers. There's rigor to it because there's so much pressure and heat in the back of the kitchen. You have to be very disciplined in how you go about things. Who has what roles and responsibilities? You don't want to call the dishwasher in to be a sous chef because that is not that person's job, and they're not going to do it well, and it's going to mess up everything else. This also evokes sense of efficiency. Cleanliness and safety. You know that the food is prepared in a clean and safe manner if everyone is following the rules about what it means to have clean and safe food. It's predictable. You can control the quality and you can reproduce it every day. You can reset your mise en place and do the same thing over and over again and have predictable results for success. With that being said, I believe that there's also a research en place. And a lot of these concepts that we have about research and what counts as research can be viewed in the same way. There is a certain trajectory of what it means to be prepared. Is a certain trajectory of how you prepare your day as a researcher, what is expected of you, publications, teaching, service. You can navigate. There are a lot of people in this space, especially in the grant seeking space. So this doing research the right way will help you navigate this cramped and crowded space. There's familiarity. So there's other people as they come in and out of your community, out of your research community, they'll understand and have a common vocabulary, be able to speak to you. There's cleanliness to it. It's not a messiness and opaqueness so folks can't understand. It's predictable. And a lot of research is about prediction. And there's certain levels of quality and control over how the process by which you know and you produce research, conduct research, and disseminate your results. So I think that mise en place is a great metaphor for understanding the research world in which we have to navigate. So for those of you who are proficient in the philosophy of science, this is epistemology. Epistemology is a study that's concerned with the nature and knowledge and the different methods of gaining knowledge. So how do we know? What do we know? What counts as knowledge? What's important? Who makes the decisions about what counts as knowledge? Who is that knowledge for? Who can have access? Who can't have access? Who gains and who loses? And whether it is through your lived experiences, your academic and scholarly experiences, whatever that might be, epistemologies are passed through. They have a generational and they have an agency to them that is almost independent of the individual. So when you walk into, if you're not in academia and you move into academia, there's a certain epistemology and set of assumptions there that you need to learn because it seems at times that the epistemology of the space is above the individuals who make up that space. And that's something I would like to challenge, is that whether or not we make the epistemological framework of where we are and how we are, or is that framework something that we enter and accept? And on that note, if it's something that we enter, it's already set, then, well, sure, we know this from our normal ways of conducting research. This is what I learned as a graduate student in the 90s. I don't think that it's changed that much. It's Cartesian, so it hasn't changed since the 1700s. And I think I would probably argue, you can argue against me, that this is the predominant foundation of when someone says research, this is the process that you'll conduct. Largely linear, maybe not always linear, but largely linear. You move from stage to stage and can predict the following stage. Hypothesis-driven research still has a primacy. Talk about whether your procedures are working or not. It's a yes or no answer. So you can troubleshoot and fix things if it's not working. If it is working, keep going. You analyze and draw conclusions. You revisit your hypothesis, and then you communicate your results. And that is kind of the assumption of how we will conduct research as researchers. Is there any place in here that I may have gotten wrong, or I can tell you where I particularly get stuck?
I get stuck in the troubleshoot procedure often. Maybe it just happens more iterations than I would like.
The linear format is what gets me, actually. My mind doesn't work that way. And it actually doesn't work that way, I think, for a lot of women.
All of these I battle with in not only in my grant writing, but in helping others with their grant writing.
Also, sometimes like before even like you can even think of a hypothesis or even a question, there's just observation, right? You just like have to be sort of immersed in an environment and be curious with an open mind to start just gathering. And there's sort of like an information gathering that happens, maybe not even analytically, but intuitively, that then leads into the curiosity. But most, like, even as a graduate student, there's not a lot of space to just sort of follow your own curiosity. You have to sort of follow the funding or whatever your PI is already working on.
I agree with you. I get stuck in here. Who asks the questions and what questions are they asking? Because there is a chain of validity assumed through all of this. And if the question isn't right, or who's asking the question, or for what reason isn't right, everything else falls apart. And so we see this in grant making, is that there's a set of questions that a funder wants answered. And you may say, but that's the wrong question, or that's the wrong question at this time, or that's the wrong question for these people. Or yes, that's one question, but there's 3 others that are more important. For those of you that were educated in an American school system and learned a foreign language in school, you always are taught to be first and to do next. And this question, to be, if we can't grapple with that and acknowledge it and come to terms with it, then you're never going to get to do. And everything here is doing, not beingness. It's all doingness. I am primarily a federal grant writer. I've been a federal grant maker in my past. So most of what I speak comes from my experience, particularly with National Science Foundation, NIH, NASA, USDA, NIST, EPA, those sorts of places. I am less familiar with private funders. However, I do a lot of private funding. So it's just such a heterogeneous place. It's hard to really get your foothold. So a lot of what I'm going to say comes from this federal funding perspective, US federal funding perspective. And typically you'll start down here at the bottom, as they say, with societal challenges, right? What is society grappling with? What is it that the American taxpayer system needs to pay for in order to solve, in order to make society thrive or safer or whatever that might be? That then moves into national priorities. What is it that we're going to focus on now? Well, right now we know it's COVID and XYZ, Ukraine, whatever it might be. And remembering that federal funding is taxpayer money invested in research in most cases, or programming or other types of work. So theoretically, everything that is funded from a national sponsor is grounded in, it is an investment that the taxpayer would want to make. So if you're thinking about who your audience is, you are writing to the taxpayer in a very broad sense. So from there, the agencies come up with their missions and strategic plans of how they interpret these priorities and how they plan to implement on those priorities. Each of the agencies has a different mission, healthcare versus agriculture and nutrition and health, could range from basic and applied sciences, but they all have a bit of a different take on how they're going to implement work in order to address the national priorities and societal challenges. And within all of that comes out calls for proposals. So we see a movement over time of what these calls for proposals look like as they are driven by societal challenges. And the easiest one is all of the COVID proposals that came out, and everyone's trying to be COVID or be a COVID researcher or have figure out a way in which their research could speak to COVID, because that's where all the money was. So the question is, like, where are you? You are part of societal challenges. You are a taxpayer. You're setting national priorities. The agencies, they'll do what they want. There's a call for proposals, and then you have to react somewhere. And the question even becomes is in setting those national priorities and the strategic plans and the goals that the agencies want to meet, are they meeting your views, your questions as a researcher, and you as a reflection of those that you research with? Where there's trouble is how do you navigate in that? The process, there isn't an oracle. You can hire a grant writer and they tell you that we know the secret sauce, they're lying to you, don't waste your money. Yeah, I mean, you might want to spend your money on them because they're good, but there is no secret sauce. This is what it is. It's about the decisions that we make and whether and how we navigate those spaces. This is actually the Koch Foundation.
So I actually have a fellowship, and one of the research groups that I'm working with, it is kind of controversial. They're affiliated with the Koch Foundation. So they gave money to Thurgood Marshall College Fund. And they also gave money to create these different centers around the country. So one of the centers that I'm affiliated with is the Center for Justice Research at Texas Southern University. There's also a center at Howard University. And so some people found this controversial that you would get funding from the Koch brothers. And so we've had some comments on that. But the director of our center, one thing that he kind of said was, so you will turn down money that can actually help. We work with disenfranchised communities, fragile communities. We do the research. So do we turn down money that can eventually, this is helping, minorities. We're doing research on, police violence against civilians. We're doing all of this criminal justice reform, bail reform research. So, so that was one of those controversial choices. But I've gotten to see the process of even getting this $2.7 million grant. And that has turned over. I helped to write the original grant. And so that has turned over to getting like $10 million from different spaces. And so even though some people don't like the source, it's actually helped a lot of people, including myself.
This is the time we're in now. And we all know it wasn't 2019. It was 1604. At least. It's 1492 and then back some. But this is what people see. And this is what is driving a lot of those values about equality and sharing and community action. And we want to change and make this place a better world, but for whom and how? And I think that when some people see Koch Foundation, they may see this. It's like, oh my God, they want to burn it down because they believe in equal rights for certain people. At the same time, they have money. And once I get a grant, I can do what I want with it to a certain extent. And it gives me entree into other grants. So that becomes, it's crazy making. It really is. It's like, how do you balance these conflicts?
I think it matters where money comes from, right? Especially if there's going to be any changes in how our society thinks about capitalist production. At the same time, like you point out the issue, right? Like the folks who have billions and millions of dollars to invest in X, Y, and Z, like it's hard enough for us to be trying to crack into those spaces and get some of those grants sometimes, right? If it's not federal funded grants like through NSF or NIH, which can be difficult on their own merit, but for private foundations. So I don't,
These are answers that you have to create for yourself. Is that money worth it? Is it worth, and are you in a position to make a decision about whether or not it's worth it? Because sometimes those decisions happen outside of you and higher up. And even in a really practical sense, there are times that I'm working with a client and I'm like, they are not ready for this grant. You are going to kill the PI. The partners don't like it. That you're going to worsen your relationship with the community. Don't do it. President says we have to do it. Okay. So, they think it's worth it. And although it hurts everybody else. So it's almost like, how do we create that bubble around ourselves? And how do we insulate ourselves from feeling the deleterious effects of what these decisions might mean? And I bring this up again, is because in making compromises, there's kind of a process that we go through in picking and choosing what fits into what bucket. Is like, are we going to, given a situation like Koch Foundation or any other funder, really. This doesn't, I'm not picking on Koch for this particular reason, but are we going to be in a position where we ask questions and try to figure out and navigate the space that is already created? Are we going to oblige it, just follow the rules and do exactly what they say because the benefits are worth it? Are we going to dominate this space? Are we going to step in, be present, be full, be loud, and make them hear us? And that may not be through a grant mechanism. It might be through something else, calling them out in public, whatever it is. Or are we going to completely avoid? Are we just not going to go there? Let them do their thing, and we're going to sit on the side and figure out other solutions. My investment portfolio, I cannot get a clean investment that I would, if in isolation, would say, yeah, you know what, this is money I want to make money off of, frankly. And then in writing and proposing for money, an organization recently told me that in my proposal, I needed to remove the statement that was the commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And I said no. And I withdrew the application. So I do have a red line. It shifts. I can't necessarily say that if that organization were a different organization, I would have made the same decision.
If I would not be able to do the work that I do, and I talk about drug policies in minority communities, a lot of this stuff is very controversial that they're funding and we're putting out. We're not watering down the message, you know, and so a lot of the things that we're doing and that the announcements that we're making, we're saying that we want to increase underrepresented minorities and women and all of that in our work. So I'm not willing to water down my message or to change who I am as a person in order to get funds. But if they will let me do the work that needs to be done, that I see every day that needs to be done, then I'm okay.
Being able to stake my claim and stand for something so I don't fall for anything, just everything, then I think is important part of authenticity and how that's going to carry you and how you feel about the decisions that you make.
500 women scientists. They gave me credibility. They gave me authority that I didn't have without them. And so that's what I would say for us, or at least for you all, is network with each other. Figure out how that you can work together to apply for those grants, and we're stronger together.
Well, one thing I will say is you've got a mise en place as well. Everything fits in its place for you. And think about who you let enter into that kitchen and who judges the safety and quality and assurity and productivity of your mise en place. Because people walking into this kitchen today would say, that's dirty, that doesn't work. You're going to cause lead poisoning. And then there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people who thrive every day in this space. Thank you, everybody.